Poultry farming in Kenya is a huge industry. It is nearly practiced by every farmer for home consumption or commercial gain. Farmers keep poultry mainly for meat and eggs production. Many have started out as small-scale farmers until they have big poultry structures with a large stock. Today we visit a farm in Mbeere South, a constituency in Embu County that has ventured into layers poultry production. At the farm, we meet Dr. Tony Kerago, a veterinarian by profession, a poultry farmer and an expert. He tells us more on layers poultry production and what it entails.
Layer production is the rearing of poultry birds with the aim of producing eggs. And what we are seeing here today is what we call layers in the grower's stage. These are layer birds that are 10 weeks old. And right now they're in the grower stage, and today we'll be learning about how to take care of them in this period.
Dr. Tony highlights on the benefits of rearing the layers birds for commercial purposes.
The benefits of rearing birds for egg production pretty much is the production of eggs. And of course we know the demand of eggs is going up by the day. So farmers are doing that. You can either do broilers or do layers, but this specifically is for production of eggs and selling to the market. So this is a commercial production of eggs.
For a farmer to invest in poultry production, he or she must consider factors such as cost of production, feeds, vaccinations and disease control, housing and poultry management. According to Dr. Tony, a farmer should be clear on what type of breeds and production system they want to use for quality eggs production.
When we are doing layers production, just like any other birds, we start from the time they are day-old chicks. Usually a challenge when you are rearing day-old chicks, the brooding stage, which we'll also talk about later. There are things that you have to do in terms of disease control. Now, at this stage, what is happening at the grower stage is that the bird, the organs are already developed, and the bird is now growing in size. That's what we call the grower stage, so it's the growing period. At this point, you want to make sure that you check the weight of the bird, make sure they are feeding you're giving the right amount of feed on a daily basis. So we have a chart that tells you on a weekly basis how much they're supposed to be eating. Then the other thing, of course, you have to make sure is that you have healthy birds that will eventually get to point of lay at an early stage. And of course, the production of egg will also be high. So the critical point here at this point is the hygiene as well as the feeding.
Food is crucial to every living thing. As for the poultry birds, feeding them with the correct type of feeds helps in their growth, bones, eggs and body formation. The layers birds have different feeds from broilers, which are the meat birds.
Feeding of the growers, so we have 3 stages or 3 types of feed that we feed the layer bird. From when they are day-old chicks up to 8 weeks old, we usually do the chick and duck mash. Then from the 8 weeks up to 18 weeks, we do the growers feed. These birds are actually feeding on the growers feed. Then once they start laying, which we expect them to start laying at about 18 weeks, that's when we start feeding them the layers mash. So we are doing mash starting from the chick and duck mash, going to growers mash, finishing with the layers mash.
Excessive feeding leads to feeds wastage. Many farmers assume that feeding a bird with a lot of feeds leads to a big bird. This is, however, a false interpretation. A farmer should feed the correct amount to improve on the bird structure formation.
The feed amount, we have a chart that the farmer should follow. It should tell you on a weekly basis how much you should be feeding them. But on average, when a bird is day-old until it gets to the end of the chick feeding stage, a bird should have consumed about 2 kilos of chick and duck mash. Starting from there, we start with growers mash, and a bird should consume about 7 kilos in total by the time you're starting to give the layers feed. Now, once the bird starts laying eggs, at that point now we have an average, and we usually do about 130 to 140 grams per day per bird. Yes.
Poultry breeding is mainly done in the hatcheries where they produce chicks for the farmers to brood.
The farmer does not do breeding. Breeding is usually done at the hatchery level. So the hatcheries that produce the day-old chicks, whether they are broilers, whether they are what we call the improved kienyeji or the layers, the hatcheries are the ones who do the breeding. So breeding is pretty much taking care of what we call the parent stock. And the parent stock is the one, these are the birds that produce eggs that later go to the hatchery to produce these birds as day-old chicks. So what a farmer does when they bring in day-old chicks, now they do the brooding. So there are two differences. Brooding is actually the first, we call it the first 3 weeks of the bird's life. But breeding is now the whole process of rearing the parents of these birds at the breeder farm.
A good poultry house should be able to protect the poultry birds from predators, wind, and harsh climatic conditions. At Mbere Farm, the type of housing used is the open litter management system. It is constructed to fit the necessary conditions that are required to rear the layer's poultry bird.
When we are talking about housing, there are a few things that we consider. First, we consider how the house is done. So a poultry house generally is a 4-walled structure. It's rectangular in shape. So we are looking at the 4 walls, and we have 2 short walls and 2 long walls. So usually what we do when you're constructing the house is, if I may start from the walls, you construct 3 feet from the floor of the long sides, which we call the length of the house. 3 feet from the floor, which is about that much. That one is usually solid. Then we usually have another 5 feet where we put the wire mesh together with the chicken wire. So those are the long sides. Then the short sides are usually totally covered. A poultry structure should be oriented in an east to west direction, just to make sure that the sun does not shine directly into the poultry house. Then the other thing I always tell farmers is that a poultry house should be tall enough where it actually should be about 8 feet or higher. So we are not talking about where you build very short houses and you're walking in, because the birds need a lot of ventilation, they need a lot of air. So you need to build a structure that is well done.
Mbere Poultry Farm is a good example for farmers to emulate when they are constructing poultry breeding structure.
The poultry house, in terms of the equipment, we should have drinkers such as these. We should have feeders. You're seeing the feeder right here. These ones are infrared bulbs. We usually use these when we are doing the brooding, but now these birds are old enough, we don't need to use these any longer. Then we have the wood shavings, which are usually on the floor. Later we'll be talking about what we call litter management and how you take care of these, because the wood shavings need to be dry and then they need to be loose, the way these ones are. So that is pretty much what you find inside a poultry house.
There are 4 types of poultry production systems. These are free-range system, cage system, also called the battery system, deep litter system, and the semi-alternative system, which is the use of free-range and cage systems. At Mbere Farm, the production system used is deep litter management. They have used sawdust as the bed for the poultry birds, and they can move freely in the poultry house.
You can either have these where you have this what we call a litter system. The birds are on the floor and we have the wood shavings on the floor. We also come up with what we call laying nests or laying boxes that we'll have on the corners. So you can either have this kind of system, or you can also come up with cage system where you have about 3 to 5 birds in one cage, and those birds usually don't move around. So that is the battery system or the cage system. Then we also have where we practice what we call free range, where the birds go outside. But that one is mostly with the kienyeji birds. For this kind of system, you usually either have the litter system or the battery system. Litter management is where we make sure that the litter, usually wood shavings is what we normally use in our country, to make sure that it's dry, remains dry, because anytime we have the litter caking or wet litter, then we're exposing the birds to other diseases such as coccidiosis. The litter should be loose, like you're looking at this one right now. It should be loose and dry at the same time. So taking care of the litter is what we are calling litter management. If you have an area where it's too wet or there's caking of litter, we usually recommend the farmer to get rid of that. You take that out and take it outside.
Hygiene is a very important aspect to focus on in poultry production. At Mbere Farm, as soon as the previous flock has been depleted, the house and equipment is thoroughly cleaned and disinfected. They allow the house to remain empty for 2 weeks before the next flock arrives. This reduces the buildup of disease-causing organisms. After the birds have been removed from the house, they remove all the equipment and dampen the ceiling, wall, and litter with water. This minimizes dust during litter removal. Litter and the used waste material should be kept away from the poultry house. A poultry farmer should not store it or spread it near the flock house, as it can recontaminate. For all the unused feeds, they dispose and do not use it on the next flock to minimize chances of disease transmission.
The reason why we usually recommend strict hygiene conditions in any poultry farm is purposes of controlling diseases. We usually spread diseases through the shoes, through the clothing we wear. One of the things we recommend to have is a foot bath. And foot baths are usually located at the entrance of the poultry house. There we have a disinfectant diluted with water, and anyone who's walking into the poultry house should have their shoes dipped into the disinfectant. I strongly recommend that you have special shoes that you use when you're getting to the poultry house. For instance, my gumboots, when I'm walking out of this poultry house, I'll leave them right there. So when I'm coming back in, I'll have to change my shoes and put on these, but still dip them in the foot bath. The second thing we recommend is what we call a wheel bath. So a wheel bath is where any car that's coming into the farm, the wheels have to go through the disinfectant as well and gets disinfected. Because that's the other way we usually spread viruses and bacteria. The other thing I always tell farmers is that the poultry house should not be somewhere where visitors come. It's only the farm worker or the farm owner if they are going into the poultry house to do something. But for visitors, we should have restrictions when it comes to visitors.
Diseases are a business killer in poultry farming. This is because they can wipe away a poultry stock or make poultry birds unfit for the market. Dr. Tony enlightens on the diseases that attack the poultry birds. Different diseases have different symptoms, and if a farmer is not keen, they end up incurring losses.
When we're talking about diseases, we have different types of diseases. We have what we call the bacterial diseases, we have viral diseases. You'll find that most of the viral diseases, we are able to control that by ways of vaccination. Usually by the time they're coming in as day-old chicks, they're already vaccinated against Marek's disease. And Marek's is one of the diseases that makes the bird, signs of Marek's are actually paralysis. So that one should be vaccinated at the hatchery level. Then once the chicks arrive at the farm management should ensure they vaccinate against diseases such as gumboro. We have Newcastle, we have fowlpox, and we have fall typhoid. So those are the diseases that they should vaccinate against. Then we have bacterial diseases that are usually treated with the use of antibiotics such as coccidiosis. For such, we usually still recommend strict hygiene and biosecurity so that we are able to control against such diseases. So some of the diseases we'll talk about are Marek's disease. Marek's causes paralysis. It actually affects the nervous system. So you find your bird is not able to move around. It drops its wings. The other thing that a farmer can notice is when you look at the eye of the bird, you'll notice some graying of the eye. That is one of the diseases that a farmer can be able to identify. We can also talk about Newcastle disease. Now, Newcastle disease comes in 3 forms. We have what we call the nervous form, where the bird kind of twists its neck, is looking upwards, and is like suckling, moving backwards. The other sign you can see with Newcastle disease is what we call the intestinal signs, greenish diarrhea, which is very characteristic. Then we have what we call the respiratory signs of Newcastle, where you see the bird is breathing, it has some difficulty in breathing, or what we call labored breathing. The third disease that we can talk about is gumboro. Now, I know most farmers have encountered gumboro one time or another in their farm, and usually the farmer will notice that birds have started dying. Farmers who are not keen, mostly what they report is that I found my birds dead. You know, you leave the house and by the time you're coming back, you have about 10% of the birds dead. Then now when you look at the signs, some of the signs you notice is that the birds have whitish diarrhea, which kind of sticks to the vent region. then death is usually what most farmers normally say. Bacterial diseases, protozoa diseases, we have coccidiosis, and most farmers will report diarrhea, which is either bloody or has a chocolate-colored diarrhea. That's one of the common signs of coccidiosis. For coccidiosis, we have antibiotics that we can use to treat that. But again, hygiene, I always tell farmers, hygiene is the most important thing.
Dr. Tony asserts that apart from administering vaccinations in poultry management, a farmer should focus on the administration of vitamins to the layers poultry birds.
In poultry management, some of the key things that I always tell farmers, we've talked about vaccination, is also the administration of vitamins. When it comes to vitamins, one of the things I recommend farmers, it's always good to have a bottle of vitamin or sachet of vitamin at your place at any one time. And how do we normally use the vitamin? The day-old chicks usually give a vitamin for at least the first 5 days. What vitamins do, they boost the immunity of the bird. They also boost the appetite of the day-old chicks, because the day-old chick has not been introduced to feed before. So we give them the vitamins. The other time we usually use the vitamins is anytime we are having any kind of change or any kind of stress that is being exposed to the birds. Now, one of the things we do is when you're changing feed, we talked about at 8 weeks we'll change from chick mash to growers mash. At that point, we are kind of exposing the birds to stress because we're introducing new feed that they're not used to. So at that point, we'll also say you give vitamins. So anytime you're making any kind of change, anytime you debeak the birds, for instance, these are layer birds, in about a week or so, they're gonna be debeaked. At that point, we also say that you should use vitamins because we're actually stressing the birds. Anytime that you're moving birds around, for instance, these birds will get to a point at 16 weeks, we should be moving them to the cages. We are causing stress, it's something they're not used to. Again, at that point, we should give them vitamins. Once these birds start laying eggs, you'll find that sometimes we have the very cold season and the production usually goes down. At that point, we usually recommend that it's good to also do vitamins at that point. Anytime we give vaccination, any other kind of medication causes stress to the bird as well. At that point, we're also giving the vitamins as well.
When a person is sick, they are recommended to visit a doctor for treatment. Same case to the poultry birds. When they are sick, they should be vaccinated immediately to prevent the spread of diseases to the healthy flock. At Mbere Farm, vaccination is a very important exercise. At every stage of vaccination, they ensure that they follow the correct vaccination chart to keep their stock free from diseases.
If we talk about vaccination, we say that Marex vaccination is given at the hatchery level. So when the birds arrive at the farm, the farmer should make sure that they get a vaccination program from the hatchery where they purchase their chicks from. Now, these will tell the farmers when you're supposed to vaccinate and against what we'll be vaccinating. So the diseases we talked about, we have gumboro, we have Newcastle disease, we have fall pox, and we have fall typhoid. Now, reasons for vaccination is that we want to protect our birds. We want them to have immunity. So if there's an outbreak of Newcastle disease, you've already vaccinated your bird, you're almost secure, you're almost 100% sure that your birds will not be affected. So vaccination is key because of course this is a business, you don't want to lose your birds. So you have to protect them. And I always compare vaccination to an insurance. So you can never say that you will not take an insurance because you are a good driver, a car insurance because you are a good driver. So the same thing with birds, you have to vaccinate them. Even if your farm is very clean, everything is the way it's supposed to be in terms of hygiene and biosecurity, please make sure you vaccinate your birds just to avoid losses in future in case of a disease outbreak.
We are taking a short commercial break, and when we come back, we will learn more on how Mbere Farm has been able to manage their brooding stock for good eggs production.